All right, welcome everyone. Thanks so much for joining us tonight for our October webinar, Nurtured by Nature, Social Emotional Learning in Science. I'm really excited about this topic. I love that we're thinking about ways to bring social and emotional learning intentionally into classrooms across the country, and I think there are a lot of opportunities in science. So we'll be talking about a lot of different aspects related to that tonight. For those of you who are not familiar with Zoom, I want to give you a really quick rundown. When I went full screen, your screen probably went full screen as well. I'm going to suggest that you actually exit full screen. You might be able to do that by hitting escape or going to the options from your drop-down menu and hitting exit full screen. I suggest you do this because that allows you to dock the chat window so that you can participate in conversations with your fellow educators. I will be having several opportunities tonight to discuss things together, so I would love for you to be able to participate in that while seeing the screen. If you want to do that, go ahead and find that chat bubble once you've exited full screen. That should dock it to the right side of your window. But you want to make sure that down here, right above where you enter your text, that you are sending to everyone instead of just panelists. So make sure it says everyone when you are in that little drop-down menu there. All right, let's try out our handy dandy chat window. Take a moment to let us know where you're from and what your role as an educator is. And while you're typing, in case I didn't mention it, we are recording this webinar, so it will be available for you to look back on. So don't worry about like scribbling down a bunch of notes. We'll be sending out a follow-up email. Awesome. Pennsylvania, 6th grade. We got some friends from North Carolina here. Neighbors in New York, teaching earth science. Oh my gosh, woo, Texas, Michigan, Ontario, Canada, we're international. 4-H educators, physical science educators. Wow, this is wonderful. What a really great range of formal and informal and from all over the country. Great. Thanks so much for joining us. It looks like most folks are sending to everyone. A couple are sending to host and panelists, so double check what you're sending to in your chat window. All right. Feel free to keep sharing your location with us in the chat window. I'm gonna move on because we've got lots of great stuff to talk about tonight. So my name is Kelly and coming to you from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, where our mission is to interpret and conserve the Earth's biological diversity through research, education, and citizen science focused on birds. I particularly work with the K-12 education team, where our mission is to create innovative resources and deliver transformative trainings that empower educators to build young people's science skills through nature, citizen science, and inquiry. And we'll be hitting on those three pillars quite a bit today. And we achieve our mission in kind of a two-pronged approach. We create curricular resources anywhere from one-off activities to full science kits. And we also do a lot of educator training, both online through these webinar series and other virtual training opportunities, as well as, I'm excited to say, in person again. So keep your eyes out for some regional workshops we'll be putting on. We've got one on the books for Georgia coming up pretty soon. And our program really focuses on meeting these three pillars that you see on our screen. So all of that resources that we create and all of the professional development that we do hit these three pillars and often multiple of these three pillars: nature connection, citizen science, and inquiry. And today we're going to be talking about all three of these and how they align with social emotional learning objectives. So my goals for this webinar are maybe a little ambitious, but I think we've got time to hit a lot of these in a meaningful way. So in this webinar, we are going to explore the health benefits of outdoor learning. We're going to look at Castle's framework for social emotional learning. We'll discover ways that SEL aligns with our three pillars of nature connection, citizen science, and inquiry investigation, and then dive in some way to a scenario where we can discuss some ways to promote SEL in outdoor activities. So just a second here, I'm going to make sure my sound is shared, and then we're going to take a moment to start by diving into what social and emotional learning is and how it might look in our classrooms. So this video was created by Castle, the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. And they put together this framework for SEL, which has 5 core competencies. And this video is going to explain a little bit more about what SEL is, how it works, and more about the framework. Let me know if you have any issues with the sound.
Think about the young people in your lives and all the different places where they're learning about themselves, how to relate to others, and work together on goals. How can we intentionally create learning experiences that will help all young people develop and maintain positive relationships, become lifelong learners, and contribute to a more caring, just world? Educators, researchers, community members, families, and the students themselves agree what we need is social and emotional learning, or SEL. SEL is the process through which young people and adults acquire and apply the knowledge, skills, and attitudes that help us to understand ourselves, connect with others, achieve our goals, and support our communities. We all need opportunities to learn and engage in environments where we feel safe, valued, and a sense of belonging. So how does SEL help schools, families, and communities work together so that all young people have these kinds of learning experiences and achieve success in education, careers, and life? Castle's framework identifies 5 areas of competence that together help us develop a healthy sense of who we are, manage stress, understand the views of others, and work together to create schools and communities where everyone can grow their strengths and interests. Self-awareness is about how we think about ourselves and who we are. It includes understanding our culture, our thoughts, feelings, and what we believe we're capable of, and understanding how these things can influence our behaviors and beliefs. Self-management is the ability to manage those emotions, thoughts, and actions in different situations so that we can achieve individual and collective goals. This includes coping with stress and anxiety, persevering through challenges, and taking action to create positive change. Social awareness is how we understand others, how we learn to take different perspectives and empathize even with people who are different from us. It also includes understanding how the broader norms and systems around us influence how we develop and create a sense of belonging. Relationship skills are how we connect and engage effectively with others, and how we form lasting friendships and connections. This includes communicating clearly, solving problems together, managing conflict and disagreements, and standing up for ourselves and the rights of others. Lastly, responsible decision-making is how we put it all together to make caring and constructive choices. This includes thinking critically about consequences, analyzing the impact of our actions on ourselves and others, and identifying solutions that support our collective well-being. We continue to develop and practice SEL throughout our lives and can adapt and apply these competencies across different contexts and cultures. How we develop SEL is impacted by our environments, which is why we need to work together across classrooms, schools, families, and communities. In the classroom, students can be explicitly taught SEL skills and also can practice and apply SEL during core subjects, like discussing different perspectives in social studies and language arts, or collaboratively problem solving in science or math. SEL is most effective when supported by evidence-based programs and trusting relationships where students are treated as partners in their learning. Beyond the classroom, SEL can be intentionally promoted throughout the school experience, from the way they're greeted in the morning to how discipline practices are carried out and how adults themselves develop and model positive relationships and the SEL competencies. Outside of school, families and caregivers provide the earliest and ongoing learning and interactions for their children, so it's important that schools listen to and authentically partner with families to help shape SEL priorities and strategies for supporting their children. Similarly, when schools partner with community organizations to align their efforts, SEL opportunities can be strengthened and students benefit even more. With SEL, we can help create schools and learning spaces where all young people feel connected, inspired, engaged, and ready to contribute to the world around them.
All right, so we got that great breakdown of social and emotional learning from this Kazel video. And what I like about these competencies is that you can really see the ways that they work together and how they encourage kids and educators to embrace a broader perspective on their skills. So I want to break them down a little bit. What we saw in the video was a really great introduction. So let's just review it for a moment. Self-awareness is how we think about our culture, our own thoughts and feelings, and our own potential. And it's about understanding how these things can influence our behaviors and our beliefs. Self-management is the ability to manage thoughts, feelings, and actions. And this can include coping with stress, persevering through challenges, and taking actions. Social awareness is how we understand and feel empathy for others, and how do the systems around us affect social norms, and how do those in turn affect how we develop. Relationship skills are really about how we connect and engage with others and form community. This includes communicating and problem solving, managing conflict, and standing up for our rights and the rights of others. Responsible decision making is all about how you can put all these things together and thinking about the impact of our actions and finding solutions that support collective well-being. So really social emotional development is giving kids the skills that they need to learn how to listen and manage their emotions, make decisions, and get along with others. In a lot of ways, these are supported by practices that we have in our own classrooms related to positive youth development. And as the video said, SEL is really best supported when kids are treated as partners in their education. So I wanted to throw this out to you now that you have this kind of overview of social emotional learning and these 5 core competencies. What are some SEL skills that matter to you in your science classroom? Or if you're an informal educator in your program setting? Students working collaboratively, self-management and decision making, time management skills, yeah. Leadership skills, absolutely. Leadership can draw from self-awareness and social awareness, responsible decision-making, relationship skills. Awesome. Darlene is saying that self-management has been a big one this year and that they've had to review lab norms frequently. Yeah, I feel like self-management has been maybe kind of bigger in the last couple years post-pandemic. I don't know if that matches other people's experience as well. Great. Thank you for sharing those ideas. keep those things in mind as we go through and talk more about how SEL aligns with different parts of science education. We'll be having several other opportunities to talk more about this together. So I want to draw our attention back to these three pillars and kind of going to go through those one by one and talk a little bit more about how these different things, nature connection, citizen science, and inquiry investigations, provide strong science learning opportunities that also allow us to help develop the whole child. So all of these different SEL skills that we'll be talking about today. So first, we're going to take a look at the benefits of nature connection for the development of the whole child. And we'll look a little bit at health benefits, academic performance, and social emotional learning skills. So I'm going to share some graphics with you from the Children and Nature Network and their resources section. There are a lot of really great infographics that you can use if you need to help justify why you want to do some outdoor learning. This one really shows some of the specific benefits to school performance. So we see an increase in academic performance and an enhancement in creativity and critical thinking skills and problem solving skills. Even just seeing nature from school buildings can help boost academic success. So we see a lot of attention benefits as well, increase in focus and attention, a decrease in ADHD symptoms, and some of those self-management issues like disruptive behaviors, we see a decrease in those and an increase in more impulse control. And also a lot of enthusiasm can be generated for our subject by taking the learning outside. So there's a lot of really great academic benefits to outdoor learning and incorporating the outdoors into your teaching. There's also some very specific social and emotional benefits. These can include relationship skills. You might build those through cooperative play and positive social relationships. Um, and we also see some positive emotional benefits, such as being more confident, which feeds into that self-awareness piece of the KSL 5 competencies. um, and increases a student's perception of their own potential. Under the self-management category, we see reduced aggression and discipline issues. So there's a lot of social emotional benefits just to taking learning outside. And then as someone who has an environmental education background, there is another aspect that I really care about, which is more care for the environment. So, along with all these better social skills, enhanced health, increased self esteem, improved grades, we see things like pro environmental behaviors and stronger emotional connections to people and nature. And these can be really beneficial. When I look at this infographic, there's a couple of quotes that I always think of. Um, and one of them is from Stephen Jay Gould, and it says, oh, I might be paraphrasing a little bit here, but it essentially says, we cannot win this battle to save species and environments without forging an emotional bond between ourselves and nature, for we will not fight to save what we do not love. And that pairs in my mind with this quote from David Sobel, which says, what is important is that children have an opportunity to bond with the natural world, to learn to love it and feel comfortable in it before being asked to heal its wounds. So how do we form that love? We form that love by giving them these formative experiences in nature where they're positively building their own skills that they'll use in their everyday life, right? If nature becomes part of their everyday experience and it's part of them experiencing all these benefits, it's more likely that they're going to form this emotional bond that leads to these pro-environmental behaviors. So there's a lot of benefits to teaching outside. but it's also an equity and justice issue. So, this quote is from an article I'll ask Jen to share a link to in the chat window titled The Urgent Need for Nature During and After COVID-19. This article argues that equity in access to green spaces can actually help combat health inequities. So the quote on the screen reads, studies show that nature's benefits are relatively greater for those who are negatively impacted by economic disadvantage, systemic racism, trauma, opportunity gaps, and other challenges. So if we can provide some of this access in our classrooms, and other learning spaces, we can actually have a really strong impact on the health and well-being of some of our most disadvantaged students. Particularly after COVID-19, this feels like a really important area to be aware of. So again, I'd like to take a moment to pause here and have a chat with you. I'd love to know, what are some social and emotional benefits that you have personally experienced from spending time outdoors? Jen saying that she can focus better when she sits outside for work. Martha experiences a sense of calm. Kelly experiences some stress relief. Shauna has found that hiking helps survive hybrid in-person and virtual instruction during COVID. It's peaceful. You have an appreciation for nature. Helps get perspective in what is real and what is most important. Yeah, I can really relate to a lot of these. I remember early in the pandemic, for example, I was living in a basement apartment. It was a really nice basement apartment, but it was still a basement apartment. It was pretty dark, and I would step outside sometimes and I would see that it was spring and the world was coming alive after a long winter, and the birds were singing and the leaves were coming out. And it gave me that perspective that somebody else mentioned, and kind of gave me a grounding experience to be like, hey, the world is still going. Things are going to be okay. Thank you for sharing some about how you've experienced SEL benefits outside. Now I'd love to know, what SEL benefits have you seen in your own students or your children? Students become advocates for the environment after they learn about the land around them. Yeah, that sense of place, developing a connection to your local area can be really important. Oh, a sit spot at a local pond or your prairie pocket. You see them becoming more peaceful and settled. That's wonderful. I saw me seeing mindfulness, listening skills have improved, increased curiosity about the world. Teaching students how to grow their own food makes them feel confident and good about themselves. Yeah, Kelly, that's a great one. Allows quiet ones to thrive and brings louder ones a sense of quiet and all when what they plant grows. I love that. Yeah, taking things outside can let students who may not shine in the classroom setting shine in different ways. Awesome. These are so wonderful to hear. Feel free to keep sharing ideas in the chat window as I move on. All right, so we've talked about nature connection and the benefits of outdoor learning. for the health and well-being of our students, let's talk a little bit about that second pillar, citizen science. So before we go too much further, let's dive into what citizen science is and develop a definition. So what are some key words or a definition or a project that you think of when you hear the term citizen science? And while you're thinking, you may also be familiar with the term community science, and there is some ongoing debate in the citizen science or community science community about what the term should be going forward. Some projects that people are coming up to mind with are doing bird counts or doing Project Feeder Watch. A possible definition is non-scientists collecting data for use by scientists, contributing to the work of scientists by being the eyes and ears where they can't be. Yeah, awesome. It's so fun for me to ask this question now versus when I started 7 years ago. The answers now are often just nail the definition. And I see a lot of really great projects being mentioned in the chat as well. So citizen science really is what you've all suggested in the chat window. It's kind of people all over the world who aren't professional scientists working together to put together the pieces of our world and answer real world questions. So in citizen science, people report their observations using basic scientific protocols to databases that scientists then use to answer real world questions. And what is so cool about citizen science is it's just a really wide variety of projects out there. So they can be locally focused, they can be globally focused, they can be all online or all outside. They can be on things on the scale of the universe all the way down to the scale of microscopic. So there's just a really incredible variety of projects out there that we as educators can take advantage of. And whenever I talk about citizen science, I have to stop for a moment to share this image. If you've been in a webinar with me before, you've probably seen it. And it may look like light pollution from the night sky, but this map is actually a map of eBird data. So every point of light on this map is a submission to the eBird database. And there's not really an underlying continental map here, right? The fact that we can see the shape of our world in these lights means there's that many people out there who care about birds and are submitting their observations to the eBird database. And what I love about this map is the more I look at it, the more amazing things I notice. Like here we've got maybe it's a road, maybe it's along the borders of some different countries, but there's definitely a pathway that sticks out here in Africa, what looks like maybe roads in Australia, shipping or boat lines out to Antarctica and Hawaii. So there's just this picture really brings home for me how incredible these databases are. And what that looks like by the numbers is there have been more than, oh, this is out of date because there's more than 1 billion observations now and more than 700,000 participants, more than 10,624 species from every country in the world. And that amounts to about 98% of all the bird species in the entire world are captured in this database, which is just wild to think about. So if you think about what it would take a scientist to replicate this data set or a group of scientists in their lifetime, it's just not possible. Big data like this is only possible through citizen science because it is people-powered science. Janice is bringing up iNaturalist, another great project. you can contribute to by sharing your observations of any living thing that you see in your area. And it has a really great app paired with it called Seek that uses computer visioning to help you identify what you're looking for. And the iNaturals community can help you get to definitions, or excuse me, identifications as well. So like iNaturalists, like the projects from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, like eBird, there's just an incredible variety out there. So whether birds are your thing or not, or maybe your students are more interested in bugs, or you really want to do a plant project this year, there is a citizen science project out there for you. And you can use some really great resources to help you find them. So I highly recommend scistarter.org. They have a project finder, which will allow you to search for a project based on the type of project you want to do, the location you want to do it, the age of the kids you're working with, and it will pull up a list that you could consider working with. And there's just so many fantastic projects out there. So citizen science can also be super motivating for kids. Most projects are actually being actively used by scientists. They are just really answering that kind of essential question of why are we doing this? It's because your data matters. So this quote here is from our friend Phil Kaler, who says, "Citizen science gives students the ability to participate in science and to feel like their observations count for something." And that can be incredibly motivating for students. Of course, there's all other sorts of motivations and reasons why people might do citizen science. It's a great opportunity for learning. Knowing that you're contributing to science and discovery is great. It can be really fun. Some citizen science programs have some competition built in, like point systems or leaderboards, rewards. So for some folks, personal performance is more more motivating, more exciting. So some programs have badges. Like actually, iNaturalist has some badges, and they'll keep track of when you see an insect for the first time, you get an insect discovery badge, things like that. And there's also socialization and community aspects to citizen science as well. A lot of folks have projects have realized that folks are also looking for connection when they do these things. So what's the connection to social and emotional learning here? I want to share with you a little information about this article, "Using Citizen Science to Support Social and Emotional Learning Needs During COVID-19 to Engage Students and Caregivers," by our friend Peggy Hart. I'll ask Jen to share a link to that in the chat window with you. So this study looked at youth-focused community and citizen science and laid out some really great SEL opportunities at different stages of participating in these youth-focused projects. So for example, when it comes to social awareness, they found that students engaging with monitoring projects and data analysis began to deepen their understanding of the interconnectedness of ecosystems and the impacts of their own decisions, and the impacts those can have on the environment. So this falls under that social awareness core competency of the causal framework. Even more broadly, um, the study found, or the report was finding that by engaging in these youth-centered citizen science and community science projects, students were starting to see the impact of human actions on their local environments. They were recognizing the interconnectedness of social ecological systems that they are a part of. They were recognizing the importance of preserving and enriching biodiversity, and they were engaging with and appreciating each other's thinking and perspectives and contributions. Um, so all of these things tie into these broader aspects of social emotional learning and the self-awareness and self-management, relationship building aspects of the Kazel framework. So there's a lot of opportunity in citizen science to tie back to social emotional learning. There's a lot of social emotional skills that can be really built into and built up when participating in citizen science. And we'll have an opportunity to talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But first, I also want to talk a little bit more about this third pillar here, the inquiry investigations. So what I mean by inquiry investigations, basically I mean science investigations. So kids asking and answering their own questions in a nature-based scientific study. This is a really authentic way to experience science. For us as educators, it's a little bit more of a heavy lift if we're doing open inquiry, but it has a lot of benefits for our students and for us as well if you need to meet NGSS standards. A lot of what goes into inquiry investigations are inherent in the NGSS science practices. And you can see some of that laid out a little bit more here. So in the science practices, we see kids asking questions, planning and carrying out investigations, analyzing and interpreting data, using mathematics and computational thinking, obtaining, evaluating, and communicating information. And if you have kids working in groups, they're doing all of this together. And so there's a lot of collaboration and problem solving that would happen in this setting doing these open inquiry investigations. So I'm going to pause for a moment and share what an example of an inquiry experiment in a classroom might look like. So Phil, whose quote we saw earlier, spent a number of years working at a school that had a blind that he built. So not every school is going to have a blind, but they built this bird blind around a bird feeding area, and would take the kids out there during their period, and they would make observations. They would do eBird checklists for their count period, and they would also run their own experiments. So in this image, you can see what looks like a dummy or a mannequin dressed in a particular outfit. So I'm wondering if they were doing a study where they try to see if they can get a bird to eat from their hands, or maybe they were trying to see if the dummy scared the bird. So there's lots of cool different experiments they would have going on. But they would start by participating in citizen science and doing these eBird counts. And then while they were out there doing these counts, they would notice things about the birds, get curious, and do their own investigations. Along with these eBird counts, they developed a really extensive database over a number of years. So Phil had tons of years of data to look back on. He had one student who was curious about the past data and wanted to look at things and see how things had changed. And so they looked at the number of house sparrows, which are shown as the pink line in this graph, and the number of dark-eyed juncos shown in the blue line in this graph. And you can see that when the program started, there were way more dark-eyed juncos than there were house sparrows. There were almost none when the study started, and then all of a sudden it flips. There's way more house sparrows than there are dark-eyed juncos, and then it sort of begins to even out and flips back over time. So the question became like, what led to this really big flip here? And so let's note when we started in 1996 and 1997, and then we have this flip around 2000, 2001, where the house sparrows suddenly become really the predominant species of the two. And so they wanted to figure out why that might be, and they looked at aerial photos of the landscape around their school. So on the left-hand side, we see 1996. The little star represents where the birding blind was. And you can see that it's woods and an open field. And then on the right-hand side, we see an aerial view of the school in 2002. So in that 2000 to 2001 school year, there would have been a ton of construction happening right there in that area. So the students wrote up a little report speculating that the construction had the urban development had an effect on these species and who showed up where. So it's really cool to see how starting with citizen science can lead to a curious question. And you won't always have a ton of data of your own to pull from, but you can always pull data from eBird to which has its tons of records that you have access to. And you could do your own sort of study similar to this one. And there's lots of other options out there. If you're interested in diving into inquiry with your students, we have some resources to help you. We have a free downloadable curriculum called Investigating Evidence, which scaffolds the inquiry process. Um, and we are actually in the process of revamping this curriculum. We're breaking it into grade bands K5 and 612, and it's really getting this exciting overhaul, and I can't wait for you all to see this new curriculum. In the meantime, you can still download Investigating Evidence as it is. It's still a really great resource and available for free at the link that Jen just shared in the chat window. So these type of inquiry projects can be really powerful for our students when it comes to their own perception of themselves, which is another piece of the Castle framework. Um, Self-perception is an important part of social emotional learning. And I'm sharing this image with you because this is what you'll see if you typically ask a student to, excuse me, if you ask a student to draw a scientist, you're going to get most times a drawing like this. Lab coats, beakers, equations, sometimes some crazy Einstein hair. This fellow has a truly excellent mustache. And this is science, right? But it's a narrow conception of what science is and a narrow conception of who can be a scientist. And so participating in these inquiry projects can really help students see themselves as scientists. So this is called an idea called science identity. And I wanted to share this quote with you from educator Jody Sikma, who previously ran a K5 bird club for a number of years. So she had students, cycle through over a couple years. And she started doing this drawing a scientist activity. And as she says here, she's thrilled to report that so far this week in her new science club, almost 98% of the girls drew a girl scientist, a few kids of color drew a scientist of color, and half the kids drew their scientists outside. So, participating in these inquiry investigations, she's seeing this change happen real time, which is absolutely fantastic. So, we have the ability just by providing really authentic experiences in science in our classrooms to help kids change their perception of themselves and build their own science identity. So that can be really powerful. Just to back that up a little bit further, I want to share with you the Girls strategies. So Girls is a public television program out of the Twin Cities, but they also do a lot of really fantastic research. So they've done a lot of literature reviews on research related to science identity, and what works to help close the STEM gap for girls and other minorities. And these are some of the strategies on the screen here that they found. And Jen just shared a link to that in the chat window. And so some of these things you'll notice sound a lot like social emotional learning skills as well. Embracing struggle, overcoming challenge, increasing self confidence. And these are also things that really help, really happen kind of organically when we are doing this iterative process of science through inquiry investigations. So in classrooms, and we're doing inquiry in classrooms, we're kind of hitting number two pretty inherently. We're supporting them as they investigate questions and solve problems. So there's a lot of research to support the adoption of open inquiry and how that can help girls maintain their interest in STEM and other minorities as well, and also build some SEL skills while doing it. Another article I wanted to share is um, one from Jen, who is in the chat window with us tonight. And she did some preliminary research looking at this combination of citizen science and inquiry and how it helps develop student science process skills. And so she was looking at a couple different measures on a couple different scales. Um, at the efficacy of science inquiry practices was one, and another was attitudes towards science and nature. And in this research found that participating in citizen science and inquiry um, we did pre and post tests with the students. We saw a positive, statistically significant change in students' perception of their own ability to do science. We also saw an increase in positive attitudes towards science and nature. So kids were saying things like, I like to identify things in nature, I like talking about science with others, and kind of the heart of citizen science here, kids can collect data that scientists can use. So we're seeing that these strategies really work to help students feel more like scientists themselves and have better and more positive attitudes towards science and nature. So all of these things really tie together in not only helping students build their science skills, but build their perception of themselves, which is we've seen called out in the Castle framework as part of the self-awareness section of the core competencies. But I want to throw it out to you again. And now that we've talked a bit about citizen science and inquiry investigations, what are some ways that you see these practices helping students build social and emotional learning skills? It can be things that we've talked about or things that I haven't brought up yet. Would just love to hear your ideas. Citizen science is collaborative, absolutely. It's collaborative in your own classroom, and it's inherently uh, collaborative with the scientists who are getting your data from the databases that you're contributing to. Students are listened to and they feel that their opinions and observations are taken seriously. Absolutely. Students seeing their information being used and getting a sense of involvement in something that matters. I saw me saying that it can help develop teamwork, collaborative learning, and problem solving, excuse me, and finding solutions. Absolutely. Darlene's saying that students will become more curious as they investigate. They will also become better observers, and this will empower them in their everyday life. Awesome. Susan's saying that she really does try and incorporate outdoors into her teaching at all opportunities and uses a lot of cooperative games. That's awesome. All right, so keep those thinking caps on. We're gonna look at these 5 core competencies again, but we're gonna focus in on responsible. Excuse me. We're gonna focus in on relationship skills. So let's dive into relationship skills and call out some specifics here. So, relationship skills are the abilities to maintain healthy relationships and to navigate settings with diverse individuals and groups. These skills can include communicating effectively, listening actively, developing positive relationships, and so on. I'll let you read through those. But I want to kind of set up a scenario here and have you imagine that you're setting up an activity. I'll come back to this screen in a moment here, but I'm going to set the scenario up first. So imagine that you've been teaching your kids about birds, about how they build their nests and what they use their nests for, and you want to challenge them to do a fun activity to put together what they've learned and build their own nests. So for this assignment, you're going to break your kids into groups of 3 to 4 to work together to build a nest. And their challenge is to use materials a bird would use and create a nest that is able to hold 2 to 3 eggs. You'll be using small rocks to simulate those eggs. And while you are planning this collaborative group assignment, you are considering ways that you can incorporate SEL. So take a few minutes and think about what are some ways that you might be able to bring out the skills that they're using and call those out so that they are more conscious of them or using those SEL skills more intentionally in their interactions with each other. How might you set up this scenario to draw out these SEL skills? And I brought up relationship skills since that is a lot of this collaborative learning here. So keep that in mind. Spend a couple minutes thinking about the scenario and how you might draw forward the SEL aspects of it. How might you frame this exercise? I'm going to go back and put the relationship skills back on the screen so you can look at those while you're thinking. And in a couple minutes, I'll ask you to share out your ideas. Feel free to share them in the chat window as you're going through them if you'd like to now. I see some ideas popping in the chat window. I'm going to give you just another minute or so to think through the scenario, and then we'll go through what's in the chat window. So some folks are calling out some of the skills that they would expect to see used in an activity like this. Janice is saying that she's run this activity every spring, and that kids find the materials at their school site. They listen and look actively, show leadership, seek support, stand up for the rights of others, and develop positive relationships. Awesome. Jen saying that she sees teamwork and collaborative problem solving and that she would do this as a team challenge and not introduce competition. Shauna is wondering about how she could frame it. And this is a really cool idea. Maybe set it up so that different groups have different supplies and the groups have to communicate with each other and barter for the materials that they need. That would add a really interesting aspect to it. Sonia might have students conduct a scientist interview about what they've discovered and learned about nest building and how they decide which idea to go with. That sort of metacognition where you think about the process that you went through is really useful and super awesome. Darlene would tell them that the criteria is that they each have to share what they contributed after they build their nest to promote teamwork and support within the group. That's a great way to bring that collaboration forward and have people thinking about it. Oh my gosh, there's so many good ideas coming in. I can't keep up with them all. Susan likes using hats with roles on them that each child gets to wear for 5 minutes to establish how to communicate, how to lead, how to scribe. Wow, that's awesome. Love that idea. It was a very creative solution. Martha would make sure every child is given time to speak in their respective groups, fostering listening and communication skills. Kathleen's suggesting group presentations of projects with the reasoning of why the group's construction would work, perhaps introducing or assigning different roles for each member of the group. So we've seen that roles coming up a couple times, especially for younger kids. It might be really useful for them to have the roles called out and see how they play out in a group. So they're paying attention to that. Rebecca's saying to have kids also reflect on what didn't work, both in building the nest and the collaboration process. Yeah, that's great. When I run this activity, I'm usually doing it as, a supplement to nest and breeding bird content. So I don't always call out the collaboration process, but it's really useful to reflect on that as well too, because when we're doing activities like this, students aren't just learning content, they're learning how to interact with each other, which is, and social emotional learning, that's happening naturally. But as educators, we have the opportunity to call our students' attention to it, be more intentional about it, and help them develop these skills while they're learning really awesome science content and science practices. Thank you all so much for playing along with this little scenario. I hope you found it useful. Does anybody have any questions about the content that we went over tonight? I did see a couple of questions come in through the Q&A about whether this webinar was recorded. It is being recorded, and I will share that recording with you all. So if you were registered, which you all are because you're here, you'll get an email with the link to the recording on our YouTube channel, as well as the links that we shared today to all of these articles and resources. So look for that sometime this week or early next week. It should be up by Friday though. And if you are looking for uh, a letter of completion for one contact hour, you can email us at k12lab@cornell.edu and we will try and send that to you next week, or excuse me, next month. If you come to that webinar, which I hope you'll consider doing, I'll be debuting a new method of getting those completion letters to you. But for now, please email us at k12lab@cornell.edu. And if you have any questions in the future, don't hesitate to reach out. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter. And if you email at that k12lab@cornell.edu, that's a team account, and we will be happy to get back to you. Thanks for coming, Kathleen. It's always wonderful to see you. All right. Well, I'm not seeing any questions come in, but I'm going to hang out for another couple minutes. I'm going to mute myself though. So thanks, Darlene. So if you have a question, feel free to put it in the chat window. Otherwise, we look forward to seeing you at a future webinar. Thanks so much for hanging out with us tonight.